know what they say. Karma always catches up to you.
Hi guys, Shodes here. This week's video I'm going to be doing a guide on Karma. I got a lot of positive feedback on my Janna guide, so it's going to follow the same format as that. So let's jump right into the pros and cons. Karma's unique kit makes her one of the most versatile supports in the game, as she is able to switch up her mantra abilities depending on the situation she's in. Her dynamic playstyle allows for high skill expression, and is very rewarding to play. With Karma, there are so many different ways of playing a fight that it's up to you to figure out what would be optimal. All her abilities work out in a way that you can use them both aggressively or defensively. What I mean by that is that you can use the Q to poke or peel, W to peel or catch, and E to chase or run away. There's so many different scenarios you can play out with different spell rotations that it can be confusing to play, but once you figure it out, Karma feels amazing. I truly feel like if you get good at Karma, you will become a better player in general, more so than other champs, because your team fighting ability will become a lot better. Another pro, which stems from her being well-rounded and versatile, is that she is one of the best blind picks in the game. Her mantra Q beats out most champions, and her mantra W makes it hard to ult in her. Her kit and range makes it so that you will be bullying the enemy for most of the laning phase, which sets her up to snowball the game. Moving on to the cons, Karma does not scale very well into the late game, so if she falls behind in the early/mid game, she feels very weak. Pretty much all enchanters outscale Karma, so you really have to do your best to create a lead and run with it. She also doesn't have any hard CC, so certain comps are hard to deal with. Her biggest counter are champions like Samira and Katarina, because she cannot immediately interrupt those type of ultimates. Moving on to the abilities now, Karma's passive is what makes her very unique. Gathering Fire lets Karma start a point in Mantra, which is her ultimate. Her ultimate empowers the next basic ability she uses. To make things easier to understand, I'll go over the basic abilities and the abilities with Mantra. Starting with Karma's Q is Inner Flame, where she shoots out a projectile that does splash damage when it hits an enemy unit. Karma's Mantra Q makes it so that the Q does more damage, the hitbox becomes a lot bigger, and it leaves a circle on the ground where it slows and explodes after 1.5 seconds, dealing more damage. Karma's Mantra Q hitbox is very generous, and it's insanely easy to hit an enemy because of that. Karma's W is Focus Resolved, where you tether onto an enemy unit or monster, and after 2 seconds, if you're still both in range of the ability, you root them. This is the indicator that shows the range you need to stay in to root them. The Mantra W makes it so that you heal at the initial part of the ability and at the end if you can root them. You can see the amount of health you will gain after the second part if you look at the gray health. Karma's E is a shield that also gives movement speed. You can cast it on yourself or an ally. Her Mantra E is an AoE shield that you can give to your team depending how close an ally is. As you can see, if you hover the shield with Mantra, there are 2 circles. The bigger circle is the range of your E, and the smaller circle is the range of who will get the AoE shield. If an ally is not in the smaller bubble, they will not get the shield. One very important thing to note is that Karma's passive reduces the cooldown of your ult by 5 seconds when you damage a champion with an ability. As you can see, my Mantra cooldown goes down by 5 seconds when the initial part of my W starts and another 5 when it ends. It goes down with Q as well. An important note, hitting enemy champs with the splash damage from Q all count as separate instances of reduction, so if you hit 3 champs with your Q, it will go down by 15 seconds. Moving on to the runes now, most Karmas will either take Airy or Comet as their keystone. Airy is a lot more consistent in shields and damage, as Karma's kit is able to utilize Airy very well, while Comet is just strictly more damage. I think both are good choices and it's really a preference thing, but I prefer Comet just because I feel like it wins me lane more consistently and I value that lane bully pressure a lot more in solo queue. A really nice thing about Comet is that if you land your Mantra Q or Tether, it's always guaranteed that Comet will hit. Moving on to the non-keystone runes, for this row I know a lot of people take Mana Flow ban, but Karma is one of the rare supports with no mana issues at all. Even if you're spamming abilities, you never run out of mana. So Nimbus is the best choice here. It actually works really well with her W because if you flash on someone to tether them, Nimbus can help you stay in tether range if the enemy tries to run away. All of the runes on this row are really good on Karma. Absolute Focus would give a lot more lane bully power with the extra AP in lane. Celerity would work really well with Shurelya's, your E, and Nimbus, but Transcendence is definitely the best to take because of Karma's passive that reduces her mantra if she hits abilities. The more ability haste and more cooldown works too well with her ult for us to go any other rune in this section. For the last rune, we're going to go with Scorch because it gives us that extra power to make our laning phase even stronger. Water Walking and Gathering Storm are okay on Karma, but we want to play towards her early game strengths to really snowball the game. For the secondary runes, I think there's a lot of variation that you could go depending on the enemy team comp, but I feel like a lot of people default to Inspiration and take Biscuits, and Cosmic, but like I said earlier, Karma doesn't really have mana problems, so you really don't need Biscuits. Cosmic Insight is a really good rune, but I don't think anything else is really worth it on this tree. For the other secondary tree, I know some Karmas like going the Resolve tree, and they usually always go Revitalize, and then it's a toss-up between Bone Plating and Second Wind. Bone Plating is really good in all-in matchups bot lane, especially because Bone Plating will help you survive the initial burst of an engage, and then you can heal from the second part of Mantra W. Second Wind is usually taken in poke-heavy matchups to help sustain health through the lane. Personally, I'm not a fan of the Resolve tree. I always go the Domination tree on Karma. My favorite setup on the Domination tree is Zombie Ward and Ingenious Hunter. This setup works because I usually always go Shirelias and then sometimes Redemption, so the ability Haste from Ingenious Hunter works really well. Ingenious Hunter also works on your Trinket, so if you have 5 stacks on it, your sweeper cooldown becomes really low, so you can clear a lot of wards and have a lot of zombie wards on the map. A lot of the runes on the Domination tree are actually really good options. Cheap Shot is good if you're paired with an ADC that has CC in their kit. Taste of Blood is decent in heavy poke matchups. Sudden Impact is bad because you can't proc it. Ghost Poro and Eyeball Collector are good nodes in this branch as well. I know a lot of Karmas are taking Treasure Hunter because it can help you snowball faster. I've tried it and it feels amazing when you can get all your bounty stacks early. Relentless Hunter is also a really good option as movement speed is amazing on Karma. I personally don't like Ultimate Hunter just because I feel like it's a little overkill with her ult because of her passive already making it short. You have a lot of good options in the Domination tree and you can try to feel out what feels best for you. Finally, for these 3 runes, the first 2 are going to be really easy. Adaptive, just so we get that extra AP in lane so we can get a lot more strength in the early game. And then for the third one, it's either going to be Armor, if it's a pretty standard bot lane with an 80 carry. Sometimes you want to go MR if they have an APC with an Enchanter, but for the most part it's going to be Armor. And there we go, that is our Karma rune page. For the itemization, my favorite opener is getting raw AP to maximize my damage early, so I like to get some variation of Amp Tome, Dark Seal, and Boots. Usually on first back, you won't have enough for Dark Seal and Amp Tome, so I end up getting Dark Seal and Boots unless we get a kill early. Dark Seal is an extremely valuable purchase because of how low risk, high reward it is. You only need to invest 350 gold for it to potentially pop off. After first back, I want to build the components for a mythic, but I prioritize upgrading my Amp Tome into a Boundal Glass Mirror last because you only get ability haste and mana regen. The AP from Amp Tome and Boundal Glass Mirror are both 20 AP, so I'd rather spend the gold on health. I think ability haste is a stat that's better later in the game rather than early because you aren't going to be spamming abilities on cooldown in lane, but you will be in team fights. Also, like I said earlier, Karma doesn't have any mana issues, so health is just strictly better, especially with how up close you will be with their W. I usually prioritize Kindle Gem or tier 2 boots, depending on how much gold I have on back. If I can buy Ionian boots on second back, I will usually do so, but if not, I'll just go for a Ruby Crystal. After my build openings, when it's time to buy a mythic, most of the time it's going to be Shirelias, but in some cases I think Moonstone is the correct choice. Which mythic really depends on the draft of both teams. I usually build Moonstone when both team comps are very front to back oriented. The reason is because in those type of long fights, having bigger shields and more stats will definitely be a lot better than the utility from Shirelias. If you can ever get a 5-man team shield with your Moonstone fully procced, the shield is massive. Also, the increase in healing on Mantra W is nice as well. I build Shirelias in team comps where we draft more towards pick comps, which is usually how solo queue drafts are, because people usually don't draft very front to back teams. Once you buy your mythic, you can pretty much go anywhere from there depending on the game state and draft. If the enemy has a lot of healing, you probably want to go Chemtech Putrefier. If you are popping off and feel like you can continue to play with that lead, Medjayas is really good. One really underrated aspect of Medjayas is that it's the cheapest legendary item, so it will count towards your mythic passive, which will make you snowball even harder. Pretty much any enchanter item will be good on Karma. Those with an active will synergize well with Ingenious Hunter, but don't let that stop you from building what you need in game. One really underrated support item is Frozen Heart. This item is amazing because it's super cheap, the stats are great, and the reduction of attack speed is very effective. I build this into comps with attack speed heavy champs, and the tankiness allows me to play a more frontline aggressive style of play because of how tanky I am and Mantra W. The goal for laning phase is to always have prio in the bot lane and to poke out the enemy out of lane. This ideal lane state sets us up for more kills, gives us first move to potential roams, makes it harder for the enemy to CS, dragon prio, and lots of gold from plates. If you can maintain the pressure without getting ganked, you can snowball the game very hard as all of those tiny leads will add up. This all starts at level 1. As Karma, you should always look to hit level 2 before the enemy. If you are the bot lane, it takes a wave and a half or 3 melee minions after the first wave to hit level 2. You should be hitting the minions and trying to push the wave in to achieve this. It's a lot easier to do this against melee supports because they can't walk up to hit the minions because they will get punished. In ranged support matchups, if the enemy is smart, you will usually get contested for level 2. If you know you are going to hit level 2 before the enemy, you should be walking towards the enemy as the last minion that will level you up is about to die to try to force a fight. If the enemy does not respect it, they will get punished. In the current clip, the second wave is crashing, and when the third melee minion of the wave is about to die, I walk up because I know we are going to hit level 2. The enemy does not respect it and gets punished because of that. In lane, I'm always trying to find angles to hit the enemy with my mantra Q, and a very important part of Karma, and honestly any support, is playing bush control. Being in the bush provides a lot of space and pressures the enemy because the enemy has to assume your effective rage is at the edge of the bush at all times. This wave state is the best and easiest way you're going to hit the enemy. When the minions are not moving and there is no enemy wave coming, the enemies have two options. One option is to walk forward to sit in the wave to try to not get hit, which is dangerous for them because you can all in them. Or two is to walk away and wait for the next wave to come in. Either way, it's a winning situation for you. A quick tip for laning is to use non-mantra Q on minions to hit the enemy champion. Non-mantra Q is actually pretty short, so this is a way to get around that. It is also a tool to push waves faster as the AoE Q will hit a bunch of minions. TLDR of laning, you want to bully the enemy as Karma and you have all of the tools that you need to be able to do so. Once you have the wave shoved into the tower, you can play for plates, look to roam with your jungle, or potentially dive. All of these options are derived from lane prio, which Karma excels at getting. Karma's teamfighting is complex in that her spell rotations and positioning depends on how a fight is being played out. You can look to frontline to tether someone, use Mantra Q as a cutoff, use Mantra Shield as a way to catch someone. There are an infinite amount of scenarios that can all be played differently. My biggest advice to get better at teamfighting is to be aware that Karma can be played both frontline and backline. It's important to understand this because you will be able to identify more scenarios in which you can do more in. Unlike most enchanters, you don't permanently sit in the backline and give your team shields. Once you abandon the idea that Karma has an always use option, you will be a better Karma player. My first tip on Karma is if you go Shurelius, make sure to spam your E on allies as you are walking around the map. I feel like a lot of people don't abuse the passive on Shurelias where when you shield an ally, both you and them gain 25% bonus movement speed for 1.5 seconds. Since Karma doesn't have any mana issues, I spam it whenever I see an ally for us to move around the map faster. It might not seem that helpful, but the extra speed can let you set up in a favorable position where you wouldn't be able to get to otherwise. Tip number 2 is to be aware of your R cooldown. If you hit your abilities, your ult is reduced by 5 seconds, so in a team fight you could definitely ult more than once if you're landing your abilities. It's very easy to forget about the CD reduction during fights because things can get hectic, but you need to pay attention. At this level, you can see that my R is a 20-second cooldown, but I end up casting ult 4 times this fight. Tip number 3 is to use your Mantra W on monsters in the jungle for HP. I feel like a lot of people don't utilize this technique, but it can be very helpful. Tip number 4 is letting your W snare finish before you RQ an enemy, that way it's guaranteed for both things to hit. Tip number 5, if your jungler does not need a leash, sit in a bush and wait for the enemy to walk into lane for a free RQ. My final advice to getting really good at Karma is to limit test a lot. It took me a while to figure out Karma's spacing, how much I can live with shield, and Mantra W healing. Sometimes if I don't know if I will die through Mantra W and shield, I'll just go for it. It might look really bad, but eventually those experiences will lead you to becoming better. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and I'll try my best to get back to you. You can always catch me at my streams and ask them there as well. I stream Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7:30 PM PST at twitch.tv/Shodas. Catch you guys later.